The air above Bremen was a killing ground on December 20th, 1943, yet somewhere inside that chaos, a terrified 19-year-old was about to rewrite the logic of aerial combat. Second Lieutenant Charles "Chuck" Yeager yanked his P-51 Mustang into a sharp left brake, tracer round slicing through the space his canopy had occupied a heartbeat earlier. It was only his 8th mission. His hands were trembling so violently he could barely keep his grip on the control stick. Behind him, closing fast, flew a veteran killer. The Messerschmitt B-109 on his tail was piloted by Unteroffizier Ludwig František, a seasoned Luftwaffe hunter with 11 confirmed victories. František had spent 2 years stalking Allied aircraft. He knew every maneuver, every escape pattern, every weakness. He was already sliding into the perfect firing position. The doctrine drilled into every American fighter pilot was unambiguous: stay with your wingman, hold formation, conduct coordinated attacks. The Army Air Forces had spent millions refining these tactics. Fighter groups practiced them endlessly. Discipline was survival. Deviation was death. But Yeager was out of fuel, nearly out of ammunition, only 60 rounds left, and his nearest friendly aircraft was 3 miles away. Every calculation said he wouldn't live another half-minute. What František could not know was that the teenager in the Mustang was about to do something no manual endorsed, something so reckless and counterintuitive that senior officers would initially refuse to believe his after-action report. A move that would, by sheer accident, help redefine air combat theory for the next 8 decades. To understand how this happened, we have to look at why American fighter pilots were dying in such staggering numbers during the winter of 1943. By December of that year, the U.S. Army Air Forces were fighting a crisis that threatened to collapse the entire strategic bombing offensive. The losses were catastrophic. During the Schweinfurt-Regensburg missions in August, the 8th Air Force lost 60 bombers in a single day, 600 men killed or captured. In October, another attack on Schweinfurt cost 62 more bombers. On deep strikes into Germany, the loss rate climbed above 20%. At that pace, bomber crews stood virtually no chance of surviving their required 25 missions. The core issue was range. The P-47 Thunderbolt and P-38 Lightning could escort bombers only to the edge of German airspace. Beyond that point, fuel limitations forced them to turn back, leaving the bomber formations exposed to Luftwaffe fighters who attacked with the precision and brutality of wolves circling wounded prey. North American aviation had finally delivered a solution: the long-range P-51 Mustang, capable of flying to Berlin and back. But a second, more dangerous problem remained, one hidden inside the very tactics American fighter units relied on. American fighter doctrine, written by officers trained in the 1920s, emphasized rigid formation flying and perfectly executed pre-planned maneuvers. Pilots were expected to maintain strict positions, never improvise, and never break formation discipline under any circumstances. Initiative was discouraged. Standardization was worshipped. The manual was treated as scripture. German pilots fought under a different philosophy. Forged through years of continuous combat in Spain, Poland, France, and the Soviet Union, Luftwaffe doctrine rewarded aggressive independent action. Aces like Adolf Galland and Günter Lützow perfected the Finger Four formation and energy fighting tactics that gave German units enormous tactical flexibility. The results were undeniable. By late 1943, experienced Luftwaffe pilots were averaging 3 to 4 kills for every aircraft they lost. Legends like Egon Meyer and Walter Novotny achieved kill ratios greater than 10 to 1. American commanders knew something was wrong. After-action reports repeatedly showed American fighters being outmaneuvered despite flying machines as good or better than their opponents. More formation practice didn't help. Stricter discipline didn't help. More hours in the cockpit didn't fix the problem either. Senior officers insisted the tactics were sound, that the fault lay in sloppy execution or insufficient training. They were wrong, fatally wrong. And the pilot destined to expose that flaw was an undereducated teenager from Hamlin, West Virginia, who had barely made it through high school. Charles L. Chuck Yeager never should have been in a cockpit at all. He grew up in the Appalachian foothills during the Great Depression. His family lived in hardship. His father worked in coal mines and natural gas fields. Chuck hunted squirrels and rabbits to supplement the family's meals, unknowingly sharpening the skills that would one day save his life: uncanny vision and extraordinary hand-eye coordination. He could spot a squirrel in a treetop at 300 yards. He enlisted in September 1941 as an aircraft mechanic. No college degree, no flying background, no social connections, just a young man with mechanical talent and a relentless work ethic. He was assigned to maintain P-39 Airacopters at Tonopah, Nevada. By mid-1942, the Army Air Forces were desperate. Combat losses were outpacing the training pipeline. In response, the service launched the Flying Sergeant program, allowing enlisted men to train as pilots without first becoming officers. Yeager volunteered immediately. His commanders doubted him. His education was weak. His reasoning skills were untested. Statistically, candidates from his background washed out at high rates. He proved them all wrong. In flight school in California and Arizona, Yeager displayed natural ability that stunned instructors. His eyesight tested at 20/10, twice normal sharpness. He consistently spotted enemy aircraft before anyone else in formation. His flying instincts were exceptional. He graduated in March 1943 and earned his commission as a flight officer. By November, he arrived in England, assigned to the 363rd Fighter Squadron of the 357th Fighter Group. He had accumulated roughly 270 flying hours, and within weeks, he would find himself alone in the freezing sky over Bremen, with a veteran Luftwaffe killer on his tail and only seconds left to live.
Among the polished college graduates and pre-war private pilots who fill his squadron, Charles Yeager stands out, not because he's exceptional, but because he isn't supposed to belong there at all. Most of the men around him come from money. Many have university degrees. Some logged flight hours before Pearl Harbor. Yeager? He's the rough-spoken kid from the hills of West Virginia, carrying an Appalachian drawl and none of the social refinement the service quietly prefers. His assigned aircraft, P-51B Mustang, number 436763, is the machine he christens Glamorous Glenn, named for his girlfriend back home, Glennis Dickhouse. On December 20th, 1943, during his 8th combat mission, a bomber escort run to Bremen, that unlikely outsider is about to alter aviation history. And it happens not through study, calculation, or tactical brilliance, but through the raw, instinctive desperation of a man convinced he is seconds away from dying. The moment begins when Ludwig František's Bf-109 locks onto his tail. Cannon shells streak past his canopy, close, violent, fast. The German ace is moving in for a textbook deflection shot designed to tear the Mustang's engine apart. Training pounds in Yeager's mind. Hold altitude, make a standard evasive turn, don't surrender the height advantage, try to rejoin friendly aircraft. Every rule says stay high, stay disciplined, stay predictable. Instead, he does something that looks suicidal. Yeager flips the Mustang inverted, hauls the stick back, and sends the aircraft plunging toward the German countryside in a near vertical dive. 7,000 feet of empty air rush beneath him. The airspeed shoots past 400 miles per hour, then 450 miles per hour. The wings begin buffeting as aerodynamic stress builds. His vision starts fading at the edges. The dive is so steep, the negative G-forces pull blood away from his eyes. This is madness. Everyone in the Allied Air Forces knows the truth. German fighters can outdive American aircraft. The Bf-109's fuel-injected Daimler-Benz engine excels under negative G. Diving away from a 109 is quite literally the worst possible move. But Yeager isn't thinking like a trained pilot. He's thinking like the hunter he grew up as, using terrain, speed, instinct, and the narrow strip of chance he has left. And then something no one expected happens. The Mustang accelerates harder than the Bf-109. The Packard-built Merlin engine, famous for altitude performance because of its two-stage supercharger, responds differently in a high-speed, low-altitude dive than engineers ever predicted. As Yeager plummets toward the Earth, the airspeed nudges 500 miles per hour. Aerodynamic pressure nearly freezes his controls. Behind him, František follows, firing again and again, but the rounds fall farther behind each second. The Mustang is pulling away. At 1,500 feet above the ground, Yeager braces, plants both hands on the stick, and yanks. The G-forces slam into him like a freight train. His vision collapses into a tunnel. The Mustang's wings stretch upward under the strain, one heartbeat away from catastrophic failure. The aircraft skims the terrain at roughly 800 feet, still moving at nearly 480 miles per hour. František tries to follow, but physics betrays him. The Bf-109 pulls out around 600 feet, bleeding energy so rapidly that his speed drops to just over 300 miles per hour. Now the German fighter that had Yeager dead to rights half a minute ago is slow, low, and out of options. Yeager levels off, reverses his turn, climbs just enough to regain position, and swings in behind his pursuer. At 400 yards, he squeezes the trigger. A 3-second burst from his .50 caliber machine guns tears into the Bf-109's wing root and fuselage. The German aircraft rolls left, trailing smoke, and begins a fatal spiral toward the Earth. In that instant, Yeager has just performed the first known combat use of what would later be called the high-speed yo-yo maneuver. He doesn't know the terminology, he doesn't even fully understand what he did. All he knows is that he lived through a fight no one believed survivable. When he lands at RAF Leiston and recounts the engagement, his squadron commander rejects it immediately. Impossible. The Bf-109 outdives the Mustang in every situation. He must have misidentified the aircraft. The intelligence officer is unconvinced. The gun camera film is too chaotic to provide proof. The dive was so violent the camera couldn't keep a stable picture. Veteran pilots review his account and dismiss it as fogged memory under combat stress. You cannot outdive a Messerschmitt, insists Major Thomas Hayes, the operations officer. Their fuel injection gives them absolute superiority in negative G dives. This is established fact. Doctrine is explicit. American fighters should use altitude and coordinated group attacks. Diving away is discouraged, borderline forbidden. What Yeager describes contradicts the core principles taught at the Air Corps Tactical School. But then something unexpected happens. Over the next 3 weeks, other pilots begin reporting eerily similar experiences. Lieutenant William Wisner dives nearly vertically to escape 2 FW-190s and finds that the Mustang accelerates away from them in the exact same way. Pilots begin whispering about it informally. Something strange is happening at extreme speeds, something the manual never accounted for. Finally, one of the most respected American aces, Captain Don Blakesley of the 4th Fighter Group, decides to test it himself. On January 11, 1944, he takes a P-51B to 25,000 feet over the English Channel and performs a series of controlled high-speed dives. The results are staggering. Below 20,000 feet, at dive speeds above 450 miles per hour, the Mustang accelerates faster than any German fighter in the Luftwaffe inventory. The very supercharger system designed to give the Mustang high altitude power produces unexpected, game-changing behavior at high speed and low altitude. Everything pilots believed about dive performance is suddenly obsolete.
Captain Don Blakesley's report hits Fighter Command like an artillery shell. He documents his dive tests carefully and submits the findings to 8th Fighter Command Headquarters. The backlash is immediate. When he presents the data at a commander's meeting on January 18, 1944, the reaction is explosive.
Senior officers, men who have been flying since the barnstorming days of the 1920s, are being told that one of their foundational assumptions about air combat is wrong. And worse, that a teenager from the mountains of West Virginia discovered what decades of doctrine had overlooked. "This is reckless cowboy flying," snaps Colonel Hubert Zemke, commander of the 56th Fighter Group. "We are not throwing away coordinated tactics for individual showboating. That is how pilots get killed." Another colonel leans forward, furious. "Your numbers are wrong. German fighters use fuel injection. Ours have carburetors. Physics doesn't change because one pilot panicked in a dive." The meeting teeters on the edge of dismissing Blakesley's findings entirely. The resistance comes from more than pride. Doctrine is a career foundation. Admitting it's flawed means admitting years of training and teaching have been misguided. Bureaucratic inertia is suffocating. And then Major General William Spike Kepner, commander of 8th Fighter Command, steps in. Kepner is an iconoclast. He learned to fly in 1916, fought dogfights in World War I, and has watched too many young pilots die while following procedures that don't work in the real sky. He doesn't care about tradition, only results. "Gentlemen," Kepner says sharply, "I don't give a damn what the tactical school taught us. I care about kill ratios. Captain Blakesley's group has the highest success rate in the theater. If his men are surviving by breaking the rules, then maybe our rules are wrong." With that, everything changes. Kepner orders immediate tests. Over the next 2 weeks, P-51B Mustangs are pushed into extreme dive profiles by experienced evaluation pilots. The data is conclusive. Above 450 miles per hour in steep drops, the Mustang out-accelerates both the BF-109 and the FW-190. The aircraft behaves in ways no pre-war doctrine predicted. On February 3, 1944, Kepner issues a groundbreaking directive. Fighter pilots are now authorized to use aggressive individual initiative. High-speed diving attacks are encouraged. Formation rigidity is relaxed. Pilots are specifically told to exploit the Mustang's strength in the dive. The old guard is horrified, but Kepner has the authority, and he uses it. Before explaining how this decision transforms the air war, the storyteller shifts tone. This channel exists to uncover stories of innovation and courage that reshaped history, stories often buried by textbooks. If you value deep research and documentary-level storytelling, consider subscribing. 92% of viewers watch without subscribing, but each subscription supports the research that makes episodes like this possible. Then the narrative returns to the sky. The new tactics are thrown into battle instantly. On February 20, 1944, the 8th Air Force launches Big Week, a massive coordinated assault on German aircraft production centers. More than 1,000 bombers strike targets deep inside the Reich, escorted by P-51 Mustangs, flying under Kepner's new doctrine. March 3, 1944. Clouds above Berlin. Chuck Yeager, now credited with 12 victories, leads a 4-ship Mustang flight at 28,000 feet. Below, 300 B-17 bombers push toward the gasworks capital. Luftwaffe fighters rise to meet them, BF-109s and FW-190s from elite wings JG-3 and JG-11. Among them is Oberleutnant Heinz Baer, an ace with 170 kills. He leads a formation of 4 BF-109 G6s. Baer spots Yeager's group and begins a climbing attack, timing his approach perfectly to dive on the bomber stream. But Yeager sees them first, his extraordinary vision buying him a precious 30 seconds. And then he does something utterly forbidden only months earlier. He rolls inverted and dives, not to escape, but straight toward the bear formation, gathering tremendous speed as he falls. His wingman, Lieutenant Clarence Anderson, joins him instantly. The remaining two Mustangs stay high as cover. Bear sees the Americans drop and assumes they are retreating. He adjusts his angle to intercept the bombers, exactly what Yeager wants. At nearly 600 miles per hour, so fast the controls feel fused, Yeager pulls up from below into the German formation. The Bf-109s, moving at only 380 miles per hour and focused on the bombers ahead, never see him coming. Yeager fires a 2-second burst. His target disintegrates. Bear breaks left, but Anderson is already there. Another burst. Another German fighter spirals down in flames. The remaining two enemy aircraft dive away in panic. Yeager and Anderson do not chase. They use their enormous speed advantage to zoom climb back to altitude and reclaim their dominant position above the bombers. The entire fight lasts 45 seconds. 2 German fighters destroyed, 0 American losses, and the bombers continue undisturbed toward their target. Across Germany's skies, the same pattern repeats. American pilots, no longer boxed into rigid formations, attack from unpredictable angles with overwhelming speed. The Luftwaffe is blindsided. The numbers reveal the transformation. In January 1944, before the tactical revolution, 8th Fighter Command's kill ratio sits at 2.1 to 1. By April, after adopting energy fighting tactics, it jumps to 4.3 to 1. By June, it hits 6.1 to 1. German pilots notice immediately. Oberleutnant Johannes Steinhoff writes in his diary, "The American fighters have changed. They no longer fly stiff formations. They dive from impossible altitudes at terrifying speed. Our fuel-injected engines no longer give us advantage. They are faster than we are now." General Major Adolf Galland reports to Goering in April 1944. "The American Mustang pilots have adopted our energy tactics and improved them. Their speed capabilities exceed ours. We are losing experienced pilots at a rate we cannot sustain." Even bomber crews see the difference. Survival chances soar. Lieutenant James Howard, a B-17 pilot, writes home, "The fighter boys aren't the same anymore." One bomber pilot writes home, "They don't just escort us, they hunt. And the Germans are afraid of them now." May 8, 1944. Chuck Yeager faces one of the most dangerous adversaries of his career, Hauptmann Georg Peter Ader, a veteran ace with 36 victories, flying a Bf-109 G-10, the newest, fastest variant Germany can produce. Their clash unfolds at 24,000 feet above Brunswick. Ader holds the altitude advantage and begins a diving attack. Yeager immediately counters, rolling into him and forcing a head-on pass. Both pilots fire, both miss. Ader expects the American to climb away in an attempt to regain lost altitude. Instead, Yeager snaps the Mustang over and dives nearly straight down. Ader follows, fully confident in his aircraft's superior dive characteristics. The airspeed climbs. 500 miles per hour, 520, 550. At the last moment, Yeager pulls out and reverses. Ader tries to mimic the maneuver, but the G-loads are brutal. His vision darkens. He levels too shallowly. By the time he recovers, the Mustang is behind him at 400 yards. Yeager fires. Rounds rake the engine cowling and wing root. Smoke pours from the German ace fighter. The German ace manages to limp home and land, but the aircraft is beyond repair. After the war, Ader writes, The American pilot who damaged my aircraft that day performed maneuvers I believed impossible. He dove away and yet somehow came out behind me. Intelligence reports insisted the Mustang could not do this. We were wrong. By June 1944, the Luftwaffe is collapsing. Its experienced pilots are dying faster than replacements can be trained. Those replacements are rushed through abbreviated programs and often perish on their first missions. Meanwhile, the 8th Air Force secures air superiority over Germany. The human cost shift is dramatic. Bomber losses, which had exceeded 20% in October 1943, dropped to under 4% by June 1944. Thousands of airmen survive missions that would have been fatal just months earlier. Years after the war, B-17 pilot Robert Morgan, who flew 30 missions in 1944, finds Yeager at an air show. Our crew calculated we should have been shot down on our 8th mission, based on 43 numbers. We flew 22 more after that. Because of you and pilots like you, we lived. My children exist because you figured out how to keep us alive. But the impact of Yeager's discovery stretches far beyond World War II. The energy fighting principles he stumbled into and Blakesley later formalized become the backbone of modern fighter doctrine. Today, every American fighter pilot, Air Force, Navy, Marine Corps, learns these foundations in their earliest weeks, trading altitude for speed, using velocity for positional advantage, and exploiting aircraft performance at extreme limits. Yeager's own career doesn't end in Europe. He earns 11.5 confirmed kills. He's shot down once, escapes through occupied France with help from the resistance, and returns to flight status. In total, he flies 64 combat missions. After the war, he becomes a test pilot. And on October 14, 1947, he breaks the sound barrier in the Bell X-1, becoming the first human being to fly faster than the speed of sound. The same instincts he used in combat, energy management, high-speed control, and aggressive maneuvering, become essential for handling supersonic aircraft. He retires as a brigadier general in 1975. Yeager never claims to have invented anything. In his autobiography, he writes, "I wasn't trying to innovate. I was trying not to die. If what I did helped other pilots, then I'm grateful. But I didn't figure anything out, I just reacted." And yet the tactics he just reacted into are taught to every fighter pilot today. The P-51 Mustang, perfectly suited to these tactics, becomes the most successful American fighter of World War II. North American Aviation builds 15,586 Mustangs and destroy 4,950 enemy aircraft in air combat, more than any Allied fighter. Yeager's own unit, the 357th Fighter Group, achieves the highest kill ratio of any American fighter group in Europe, 5.7 to 1. They destroy 609 German aircraft while losing 106 of their own, success driven directly by their early shift to energy fighting. Don Blakesley, who fought to validate Yeager's unexpected discovery, retires a colonel with 15.5 victories. Though recommended 3 times, he never receives the Medal of Honor. In a 1989 interview, he reflects,
"The real heroes were the kids like Yeager," Blakesley later says. "They figured things out while everyone else insisted they were wrong. I only had enough rank to make sure someone actually listened." Major General William Spike Kepner, the man who overruled his own staff and authorized the new tactics, retires as a lieutenant general. His February 1944 directive becomes a case study in military academies worldwide, cited as an example of true leadership.
the ability to challenge entrenched doctrine when evidence proves it flawed. German pilots who survived the war speak with surprising respect for their American opponents. Johannes Steinhoff, who would later become a general in the post-war Luftwaffe, writes in 1977, "By mid-1944, American fighter pilots had surpassed us in both tactics and aggressiveness. They learned faster than we could adapt. The Mustang pilots in particular, they were extraordinary." But the lesson of the Mustang Revolution reaches far beyond aviation. Innovation often arrives from the least expected direction. A 19-year-old from West Virginia, with a thin education and no pedigree, noticed something that seasoned officers and engineers had overlooked. And the institution almost rejected his discovery simply because it clashed with established doctrine, because it came from the wrong person at the wrong time. It forces uncomfortable questions. How many breakthroughs have been dismissed because they challenged the assumptions of the powerful? How many lives could have been saved if systems were better at recognizing truth, no matter who delivers it? Charles "Chuck" Yeager passed away on December 7, 2020. In its obituary, the New York Times called him the most famous test pilot of his generation. It highlighted his combat record. It described how he broke the sound barrier. But it did not mention that he had accidentally reshaped the future of air combat by doing something that every expert swore was impossible. His story is a reminder that the greatest innovations often aren't born from committees, planning documents, or perfect credentials. They come from desperate improvisation, from outsiders, from those who don't know or don't care what the rules are supposed to be. Charles Yeager never intended to change military doctrine. He only wanted to survive his 8th mission. That he did so by violating every regulation in the fighter pilot's handbook and in the process saved thousands of men is what makes his story extraordinary. So the next time someone insists that something is impossible simply because it defies tradition, remember the teenager from West Virginia who was too inexperienced to know he wasn't supposed to outdive a Messerschmitt. Sometimes, not knowing the rules is the only way to break them.